flag on. Already started? Oh, okay, okay. All right, so I hope the. All right, good. So, can everybody hear me now? Is it any better? All right, good, great, great, great. All right, so sorry about the delay. We're having a bit of problems with the audio, but you know how technology is sometimes. So welcome to the Aeronautical Club of the West Indies, very first YouTube live video. My name is Troy Berry. I'm a commercial pilot. I grew up here in Kingston, Jamaica. I'm a past student of St. George's College. So early on social media, you guys were asked to send your questions. So we'll go through the questions first, and then I'll give you a brief outline of what um, happens in flight training. So with the question, all right. So we have Merritt Island Radio Check. What's the best thing about your profession, or what do I look forward to the most? So I am not working for an airline as yet. I have my commercial pilot license. I'll need to get some more hours before I can be hired by an airline. But what I like most about being a pilot is the freedom of flying. I myself, I like travel. I like to explore different places all over the world. As well, I like the act of flying itself. Because flying nice is a very peaceful and calming thing to do. What got me into piloting, or what got me into aviation? It was just an obsession since I was younger. I don't think there's one event I could point to that said, "Hey, this is the turning point." But it's just something that I really loved from I was younger. The sense of the jet fuel, the fact that this big heavy thing can stay up in the air. It's just an obsession. I think all pilots can relate to that. How do I become a pilot? We'll go through that um, after the question. So, good day, sir. Where can I go to further my goal and get some flights done? So, in Jamaica here, down by Tinsupen, we have the Aeronautical Club of the West Indies. They have a nice little Cessna 152 here. Yes, Aeronautical School of the West Indies. They have ground school going on now, so you can sign up here and get your PPL ground school out of the way. And when it comes to flights, they have an aircraft here. If you already have your pilot license, you can rent the aircraft. It's 220 per hour, 220 US per hour per person. How long does it take to become a commercial pilot? Well, that's something that varies greatly. It's not something that's set. It depends on your goal and your situation. So if it's something that you're doing part time, it would take a lot longer in comparison to if you're doing it full time. And it just depends on your situation. For me, it took 7 months, but I've heard of people that have done it in as little as 5 months, and I know people that do it that take a whole year and a half to get it done. So it's something that varies widely. How many hours are required for a private license, and how long does it take to get it? So the private license is the first license that you get in your pilot training. I'll go more in detail with that a little later when I talk about what the training course is like. How many hours is required? There's a minimum hour requirement. Um, so out here in Jamaica, the minimum is 40 hours. In the US, it's 40 hours as well. what's the school fee? That's something that varies widely as well. Um, there's no like fully operational schools here now, but if you're looking overseas, like in the US, as I said, it varies widely. So you find schools as cheap, quote unquote cheap, because nothing in aviation is really cheap, but as low as say $60,000 and all the way up to $150,000 or more. And that would give you your private pilot license straight up to your commercial license. So it's up to you to check out the different schools and see if they have what you want. Where where did he get his start in flight training, locally or overseas? I got my flight training overseas in Florida, a school called Two Fly Airborne, because when I wanted to do my training out here, I did my training last year. I got my commercial pilot license last year. And at the time, there were no active flight schools out here as yet. It's on how to get this stable here. All right, so those are the questions we have. Those are the questions we have so far. Feel free to ask any other questions. So I'll go into giving a breakdown of what to expect as you go into flight training. So what I'm about to tell you is as it pertains to the US, and the US governing body or government body that governs aviation is the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. So these hours and requirements pertain to them. So there are two main types of flight schools that they have. What was the here? I'll get to the questions at the end. You can ask them now, but I'll get to them in the end. Um, you can probably just like make notes of the questions. All right, so you have two main types of flight schools in the US. You have Part 61, or sorry, two main types of flight training. You have Part 61, which is with an independent instructor, and then you have Part 141, which is a bit more organized, and that's the regulation that you find flight schools under. So these requirements are what you get, or these requirements pertain to Part 141. So we'll start with the private pilot license, which is the first step. So why would you want a private pilot license? What are the privileges of having a private pilot license? Basically, with the private pilot license, you can fly an airplane, but the downfall or the con or disadvantage is that you can't be you can't fly for compensation or hire. So you can fly a plane, but you can't get paid for it. They have something that they call pro rata share. So the rule is that as a private pilot, you have to pay what is called pro rata share. And what's that? Pro rata share is basically if you divide the cost of the flight, so the cost to rent the plane, the cost for fuel, the cost for oil, things like that, you as the private pilot have to pay at minimum half the cost. So if everybody put together for the flight, you have to pay at least half of that. That's the rule as a private pilot. So what are the requirements? Somebody asked how to become a private pilot. So what are the requirements? You must be 17 years or older, must be able to speak, read, and write the English language. You have to get your student pilot certificate, which is pretty simple. You just go online and sign up for it. There is a written test that you have to do. They call it a written test, but you really do it online. And then you have your flight training. In order to get the private pilot license, you need a minimum of 40 hours, which was stated earlier. So in the flight training, you learn your basic things. Remember, this is your private pilot license, so you're starting from scratch. So you learn your different type of takeoff, your short field takeoff, your soft field takeoff. You learn your speed turns. You learn your emergency procedures. All of them little niceness there. And then at the end, you have to do what is called a check ride. Now, the check ride is something that you do at the end of all your qualifications, at the end of your private pilot training, the instrument rating training, and your commercial training, and any other upgrade that you want to do, you have to do what you call a check ride. So the check ride is the final assessment that you do before you get your license. This is conducted by a designated pilot examiner. We usually just call them DPE. And there are two parts to the check ride. You have a oral, so you go into the room with the examiner, and he asks you the questions, you answer, make sure that you comprehend. Well, not comprehend, but understand what you're talking about. You can explain it, sir. And then there's a flight aspect, where you have to fly the plane with the DPE and prove that you can do all the maneuvers, do everything that you learn within a certain standard. There's a book called the ACS, Airman Certification Standard. Everything that the DPE can ask is in there. Anything that they'll test you on is in there. So yeah, that's it for your private pilot license. Those are the requirements and what the training would consist of generally. And then up next, what people usually get is their instrument rating. So the instrument rating isn't a license per se, so you don't have an instrument license. It's more of an add-on that you put on your license. So after you get your instrument rating, you become an instrument rated private pilot, not an instrument pilot. Cool. So what are the privileges of getting your instrument rating? With your instrument rating, they'll train you how to fly using instrument flight rules. You can fly plan, and you're able to fly in class alpha airspace, which is above 18,000 feet, where you have all of the big planes flying. Yeah, so that's the benefit with the instrument rating, because when you learn to fly in PPL, they're going to teach you visual flight rules. So you have to stay a certain distance from the clouds. You have to use like ground references to navigate and that kind of thing. But with the instrument rating, you're more focused on the instruments inside the aircraft. The instruments are those things you see inside the plane that give you awareness of what's going on with the plane. So like the airspeed, altitude, etc. So the focus is on the inside of the plane. So in theory, you can conduct a flight without looking outside of the plane. So you can get from point A to point B without really focusing on the outside. How is this beneficial? You can fly through clouds whenever there's low visibility conditions, a whole heap of fog or low clouds, etc. You can still fly. You're not restricted. Requirements. So you'd already have to have your private pilot license. Requirements, you need 50 hours PIC cross country. So PIC is pilot in command time. That's when you're flying the plane and you are the main person flying. You are the one who is interacting with the controls the most. Cross country, when it comes to flight training, usually refers to flights outside of a 50 nautical mile radius. So if you take off from this airport here at 10 to 10 and you fly greater than 50 nautical miles, that would be considered a cross-country flight. So you need 50 hours PIC cross-country. So you're the person in control of the plane and you're flying more than 50 nautical miles. All right. So 40 hours simulated or actual instrument time. So they have several view restricting devices that there's glasses. I wish I had like an example that they put over you so that you can't look over the plane. Sorry, look outside of the plane and you have to focus on the instrument. Those are called foggles. Then have some really weird ones as well that cover your eyes and stuff. But that's to simulate low visibility conditions. So you'd need 40 hours of that simulated instrument time or actual instrument time. 15 hours instrument training from an instructor, and you need a 250 nautical mile cross country flight with three different approaches. In instrument training, you learn about the different instrument approaches. Those will help you to land when the weather is bad. So that's it for instruments. And then the one that everybody knows about and everybody likes now is your commercial pilot license. Now, what is the privilege of having a commercial pilot license? This is the point where you can finally get paid for doing what you love. At this point, when you have a commercial pilot license, you're able to fly for compensation or higher, so you can get paid. Requirements, you need 100 hours of PIC time, as explained earlier, 50 hours of cross-country time, 20 hours of training, 200, and all of this put together, you will have, yeah, all of this put together, as long as in addition to the training that you've done before, you should have a total of 250 hours total time. And then it can be a check ride where you show every, I don't think I mentioned that for the instrument. So after instrument training, you have your check ride for that, you pass your instrument rate. Same thing for commercial as well. You finish your commercial training, you do your check ride, you pass, you're good. Yeah, and that's basically it for the different license and things that you get. You can get your, so you can go like straight from private to commercial without doing an instrument, but that would have certain restrictions. Yes, you can fly and get paid for it, but if you do not have your commercial license, sorry, if you don't have your instrument rating, with the commercial license, you cannot fly more than 50 nautical miles for compensation, and you can't fly and carry passengers at night for compensation either. So my flight training experience, so for me, the private pilot license was the most difficult one because it's starting from scratch and everything can seem overwhelming at times, especially when you're just going into the cockpit and taking the flight controls. You're not really sure where to focus, but it's something that you get as time to go along. So that's it for the private pilot license. For instrument rating now, I'd say instrument is a lot of theory. Like every time you talk to somebody about IR, you learn something new. There's always some new abbreviation or something. IR is just a whole heap of theory. And commercial was the shortest and possibly the easiest out of all of them, to be honest. In my opinion. I mean, it's going to vary for everybody, but the commercial was pretty nice. All right, so we can probably go back to the questions. Have you ever failed a check ride? What's the ACS? ACS standard and Bill Boss standard. Hold on. Start from the top. So have you ever thought about what happens if the wings fall off? There was one above that? Or what was your scariest experience in flight school? Oh, I'd have to say my scariest experience from the top of my head was probably when I was doing my long cross country for commercial. Yeah, my long cross country for my commercial license. It was a flight from Florida to Georgia, and on the way, I'm not exaggerating. We had to dodge 5 thunderstorms, and at one point it was night, and we're flying through the edge of one of the thunderstorms. That was scary because you can't see nothing, and the plane just a shake. So I mean, IR came into play there. But yeah, that was possibly one of the scariest experience in flight training. Have you ever sat and thought about what would happen if the wings fall off? Yeah, if the wings fall off, I'm in a trouble. It done so. You should do a Twitter space too. Don't have a Twitter at the moment. Okay. In the morning. What was your cross country like? The cross countries are actually quite boring to be honest because they're long flights and you're not doing much for majority of the flight. Once you take off, you go into cruise. You're just relaxing. I mean, you're still going to um, monitor your different instruments and whatnot to make sure that everything is working and everything is all right. But you're not actively doing anything for most of the flight, so you can relax and enjoy the view on that and that kind of thing until you get close to your destination. Oh yeah, one thing I think I forgot to mention about the flight training is that between each stage, so between your private pilot license and your instrument rating, as well as between your instrument rating and commercial, you're going to do what you call hour building. So depending on what is required for the next stage, you go and fly around and do some hours. When I was going to school, we could go to just about any airport in Florida as long as it was greater than 50 nautical miles away from where I was in Merritt Island. And our building, to be honest, was probably the most fun part of flight training. Just get up and fly. Have you ever chilled? Have you ever failed a check ride? No, actually, I have never failed a check ride, luckily. I mean, most people tend to fail the first check ride because they're not sure what to expect. But yeah, I was fortunate enough not to fail a check ride. There's ACS standard and then there's Billboard standard. That's true. That's true. Merritt Island people. Have you ever met any crazy pilots while training? Naturally, yes. But we won't go into that here. FAA won't hear you. No, no, we never flew through with the thunderstorm in our way. We just touched the edge of it. Is there a set amount of hours for our building? Yes. So remember, for each stage, you need a certain amount of hours doing certain things. This is probably some kind of base, but based on how many hours you have from the previous stage of training, then you'll know how much hours of hour building to do for the next stage. So, for example, for IR, you need 50 hours PIC cross country. You do that in the hour building stage. So, based on how much Cross country PIC hours you have before would determine how much hour building you'd have to do to build up that 50. Hour building was good. That was the most fun part of flight school, the most enjoyable part. You don't have to be sitting with an instructor or anything. You just fly a plane. Have you ever experienced any emergency? Luckily, I haven't experienced any emergencies per se. I've had minor glitches like the vacuum pump stopped working and stuff like that, but nothing that I declare an emergency. That is, our building is the worst part. Serious, Macaroni. Any memorable instructors? Yeah, really. I mean, I've had good and bad instructors, but they were all pretty decent. Well, one was very good, I can say, but they all knew their thing. Big up Aldrin. Big up Aldrin for real. Although he wasn't my one of my instructors, but he's a very good instructor. Stephen needs ability. I've never run out of gas before. Never run out of gas before. Do you always need a college degree to fly? No, it's not a requirement to have a college degree to fly. So, as stated earlier, you must be over 17 years. You must be able to speak, read, and write the English language, and then you get your student pilot certificate. You do your written test, you do your flight training, and you're good to go. Get your check right out for the way. But a degree isn't a requirement. Um, some major airlines would prefer if you have a degree, but it's not a must. What do you plan to do next? Not sure as yet. Looking at the different options, but I'm really considering becoming an instructor. Mhm. Yeah. Does the airline pay for your ATC license? Uh, I'm not exactly sure about that part. I think most of them do in the US, but I'm not sure. So don't quote me on that. Which flight school did you attend? I attended Two Fly Airborne. It's a flight school in Merritt Island, Florida, a couple miles east of Orlando. And I was there last year, 2020. That's what I wonder. Feel like it's a whole checkerhead in the comments. Yeah, ask him again, Omar. Have I flown in Jamaica since I've gotten back? Yes, I have. I've flown the little black and gold Cessna 152 that the Aeronautical School of the West Indies has. It's a nice little plane. It does the job. Um, what's it like flying in Jamaica versus flying in the US? Flying in Jamaica versus flying in Florida. Jamaica, especially Kingston, this side is densely populated. So right as you take off, it's buildings and everything. Plus, you have to learn to deal with the mountains as well. In Florida, it was all flat, and there was a whole lot of open land in the case of an emergency. You know where to put the plane. So yeah, apart from that, there isn't really much of a difference. Just the terrain. Yeah, there isn't really much places to go in Jamaica as well. There are far less airports. You have Ian Flemings, Ken Jones, there's Negril. There aren't much options. It's a small island. Yeah, ATC communication for me was one of the hardest things to learn. But it's something that you get used to after a while. Because the talk so fast, when you hear it the first time, you just confused and feel overwhelmed. But it's something that you have to practice and get used to. I used to get nervous when I talk to ATC, but not anymore. Nowadays, it's like a regular conversation. a bit dusty. Do you have a specific airline you want to fly? Hey, at this moment, not necessarily. I really like Singapore Airlines, but I mean there are a lot of options. All right, so Stephen had asked, where was the question? Seven. Yeah, so remember you guys can ask questions in the chat, not checker questions. We're discussing flight training, not even know what they represent. All right, so yeah, so written test questions aren't that difficult, especially if you prepare. So for the FAA written test, there are apps that you can download. One popular one that is used is the Shepherd Air app. They give you a bank of questions that would possibly come on the test that you can study from. You just practice those and you're good. All right. So before I go, are there any other questions? So if I any other questions pertaining to flight training? What's the cost of flight training? It varies widely, but usually you find them in the range of about 60,000 to 150,000 US or even more. What tips? Right, and that would cover from PPL straight to commercial. So from no license to commercial license, including your instrument rating. What tips do you give a nervous flyer like myself? Right, exactly. So, um, I find that basically just knowing about the plane and dismissing certain uncertainties, basically learning about the plane and knowing what is happening and how everything happens tend to ease the nervousness in some people. Do maneuvers make you feel sick? Not anymore, but in the beginning, a little bit. Did you convert your license to fly in Jamaica? No, I didn't convert my license. So with the FAA license, the US license, you can fly different airplanes that are registered in the US. So if the tail number on the aircraft starts with N as in November, I'd be able to fly it. If it starts with 6Y, then it's registered in Jamaica, and in that case, I'd have to convert my license to a Jamaican license. So I have to go to the JCAA and do some tests. That's the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority. Do some tests and convert my license to fly that. But the Cessna 152 that they have here is registered in the US. It's a November airplane. All right. So before I go, we have the Aeronautical Club of the West Indies here in Jamaica. They're working on they have the club already, and they're working on starting a flight school as well. So you have the Aeronautical Club of the West Indies and the Aeronautical School of the West Indies. And there are different packages that they offer for the aspiring pilots. So before you can, so there are three packages, right? So you have for high school members, you have aspiring basic members, and aspiring members platinum. For high school members, that's 250 Jamaican a month. Wait, what did I say? Oh, it's 2,500 a month. They're not hiring at the moment, but when the school starts up, then maybe you can ask again. Yeah, ground school has started, but when the flight training aspect starts up, then you can ask about them hiring. Um, yeah, and with the club, so you can check out the club's website to find out what you get for each package. But mainly for the club, you get to socialize with pilots, ATC, aircraft maintenance persons. So you get an idea of what goes on in the field. You see the plane here behind me. They do drone mapping as well, drone mapping and reading, GPS nav, and more. So you can join the club to get exposure before starting flight school. Yeah, and you can always come down to Tintipen and ask any questions that you have. I'm here in my free time. And remember to like and subscribe. Alright, so thank you for coming out. Yeah, thank you for coming out to Aeronautical Club of the West Indies, the very first YouTube live. And I hope you guys found it useful and knowledgeable to learn something. And see you guys next time.